Coin traders, what is going on? Thanks for joining me for the show. Going to be looking at GRT, the graph token, and a lot of change since we have talked about GRT about 2 weeks ago. So specifically, obviously, huge pullback with the rest of the altcoin and crypto space, especially after kicking off of these 12 and 26 periods as resistance. And now on this rebound right now, broke through the 12, but obviously looking at the 26 and 50 period once again as those big resistive points. So right now we're on a 3 impulse structure to the downside. So we have looked like we are finding our bottom, especially given that the longer term charts are setting up for that type of a move as well. So right now we did find a local closing support for the daily coming in just above 2361. So if we do look left, big period of support and support as well. So this was a zone of support for this big pullback prior to rallying up to the current trend high. Current trend high right now is sitting at 49.63. So if we actually zoom out and look where we came off of back in 2022, when we were down in the 5-cent level, still pretty good rally so far, 400% all the way up to the trend high, about 800%, so over a 9x return in that instance. So very, very good setup still for GRT, still looking very nice. Obviously off the rally, got a first phase up, slight pullback, and then a huge rally. Typically, this is going to be the 3-wave on the typical Elliott wave theory. And so obviously such a huge retracement would be looking up for a 5th impulse here, but we do know that we are typically going to be looking for a little bit more of longer term consolidation and chop, and that most likely this is going to be the current trend high for a little bit coming in, just due to the amount of rally and then also the amount of retracement so far. So coming in from the trend high down to the low, we're looking at about 58%, over 58%. So pretty big, substantial retracement, almost 60%. We have seen plenty of other cryptos in the altcoin space retrace about this much, but obviously this does span a little bit farther on the upper end, but we do know that with such great gains that typically these retracements are what we end up seeing. Now, if we look at a Fibonacci retracement from the low, the previous low of the move up to the current trend high right now, you can see that the pullback actually bounced off of the 78.6 retracement. So that's a pretty good support. We don't like it going any lower than that, but typically when prices do end up retracing to this level, they don't often see immediately a new trend high, and it does take a pretty substantial amount of time in order to actually rally up, change those trends, and then put in a new trend high on top of that. So definitely not expecting anything here soon in the probably coming month or two, I would assume. But obviously that does depend on what Bitcoin and a lot of the other altcoins do. But just know that right now it is going to take some time to actually change this daily trend. But overall, we're still looking at very nice longer term trend setups. So doing a flip over into the weekly chart right now at this time, just talk about this setup right now and how good it does look based on a Wyckoff accumulation. So huge pullback, big period of accumulation, and obviously what we like to see in this instance is these EMAs start far out and then just start to get tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter until we finally do have our nice bullish break. So this is typically what we find in these big periods of accumulation, where we do finally end up breaking bullish from these EMAs, turning them into a nice bullish cross here. So that's exactly what we found. A first bullish cross came in when we did break above, hold 50 period EMA as support, rally a little bit more, nice flag pattern pullback with decreasing bearish volume. And this is just amazing setup with just all this stair stepping, picture perfect decreasing bearish volume over that 5-week period, maintaining support on top of these EMAs. And what's crazy typically about these type of moves once you first break and flip bullish on EMAs is that the gap of support for a zone of EMA support is not that much. So typically we do need to see a pretty substantial hold of these EMAs and then follow through, which is exactly what we saw. So as you can see, we saw the 12 period EMA rally up, the cross of the 26, which pretty much matched up right with the 50 period when we did get this back test from this weekly chart. So pretty good sign, obviously maintaining support on top of this big zone before this very nice rally with huge bullish volume. So very good sign as well. And then even now on this pullback, still looking at decreasing a bearish volume, especially with such a significant retracement. Now, if we do look at EMA support on this weekly chart, did dip below and hold a close below the 12 period EMA, but still maintain a close on top of the 26. Obviously a little bit of wicking down, but still maintain price level support on top of the 50. So still an extremely good looking chart right now, especially without breaking the weekly trend. So low, high, pulled back, set our low, higher high, pulling back, and now finding very nice defense and support, yet still maintaining higher lows on this chart and not even really coming that close to it. So even from the low point down to the low of what we'd have to see to break would still require another 33% downside leg. So from current prices would be over 53%, which isn't likely, especially after an already 58% gain with any sort of without any sort of significant retracement and bounce. So typically on this type of move, that is what we're looking for, is scouting a lower high, putting in a higher low. And then if we can do that, then we would have a shot at breaking these trends and then obviously resuming a longer term uptrend in that instance. But like we said, after being overbought and overextended for so long, do need a little period of time to cool down. And that's kind of what we do anticipate at this phase of the cycle anyway. And so even turning on technical indicators, stochastic RSI and RSI, relative strength index, huge overbought level, but it was a higher high compared to what we saw on the previous trend high where we got to 72.31. So on that move, topped out at 89.24 for the close. Since we do have a wick on top, we know that the RSI actually got above that, and then obviously pulling back and putting in a new lower low for GRT, which is a pretty good sign actually, because we actually kind of normalized now down to 52.6 and bouncing off kind of the 50 line, being able to resume that uptrend once again. And now looking at stochastic RSI as well, both are down below the 20 line, so we could have another week or so in order to see this nice bullish cross. But with a little bit more upside, we would expect it to actually come in here before too long, and probably before we know it, and end up kind of like what we saw in this instance, even though we didn't break the 20 line here, still being able to put in a little bit more of that upside, especially if we can get some upside pressure out of the RSI, and then also seeing a little bit more bullish volume coming in on that move. So if we do look at the last time we were below the 20 line and saw our bullish cross, that was back during the fall lows before the fall rally, and then obviously very nice impulses to the upside from there. So could still experience something similar, especially since we are maintaining this nice longer term weekly uptrend. Now, do want to zoom out and got the VPVR turned on, volume profile visible range, which shows volume by price levels. So one of the things that we are looking at is coming up on a center point of mass based on previous price trading, coming in right around the 35 to 36 cent level. So if we do look left, big periods of volume down here on the chart back in the start of 2021 when we had our initial rally up to the all-time high. Also looking now to the left, or excuse me, to the right a little bit more, but left from current prices. This was a big period on this bounce where we saw a lot of price trading. So kind of the heart line of that is going to be where we do match up for the big point of resistance here, which is actually lower than what we saw currently for the trend high. Now, if we actually do look left, though, big period of resistance based on all this bounce support here. For that, we would be looking at a weekly close of about 52. So we know that the 50 cent psychological is still going to be an extremely relevant line. And the good news, though, is that if we do get above that and maintain a close on top of that, then based on VPVR volume, we would be looking at a pretty big taper off. So a little bit more ease from the bulls. But like we talked about with these type of Wyckoff scenarios, what we're looking at right now, and especially with a little bit longer consolidation drawn out, is this being the phase D that we typically look for to be able to show our sign of strength. So consolidating in this level, especially on top of previous resistances acting now as support, is still a very good sign and setup. So it is time to just be patient, especially holding EMA support on this weekly chart. So this is exactly typically what we want to see on these type of moves, where we do have our lows starting the spring cycle coming in, and then our sign of strength consolidating, which leads to a huge explosive, very nice phase E breakout typically. And even though we might not necessarily be shooting for all-time highs, we know that potential price gains are still going to be pretty significant for GRT in this upcoming bull cycle, especially with a very strong use case like we have for GRT. Now, flipping over into the 2-day chart here first, and just kind of want to talk about this current bounce, because we did talk about the current bounce and this current move actually putting in lower highs, and several reasons for that, like we talked about, do have plenty of upside resistances. But then obviously on this move and this bounce, decreasing bullish volume, which is pretty stereotypical for more of a bear flag coming in. So that's typically what we see and experience, especially out of these type of flush moves, where we have a little bit more of an oversold bounce. So if we had more of a V-shaped recovery with a lot of volume coming in, that would be one thing. But when we actually don't have a lot of upside directional move immediately with a lot of bullish volume to follow, especially after such big significant sell-offs, that always stereotypically leads to these type of flag pattern moves where at best case scenario, we're hoping for a pullback and then setting a higher low to resume the trend. We're not necessarily thinking that we can continue to go up and up and up and up without any sort of significant smaller term trend reversal. And so this also aligns with the fact that we're rejecting from the 12 and 26 period exponentials as well. So we know that another big period of resistance is coming up. And if we do want to look left here, big zone of resistance that was based on previous support and resistance. So looking left, big period of resistance as indicated by all these upper wicks, and then finally had a nice bullish candle blow through it and maintained it as closing support despite this huge magnitude of this lower shadow of this candle that came in, which confirmed support off the 12 and 26 EMAs. Now, same sort of thing coming in on the 4-day chart as well. So huge pullback, obviously small volume on the sell-off, but then really small volume now on this bounce. So especially on this 4-day chart, getting stuck up at resistance at the 12-period EMA. For the price for that, we're looking at 30.58 cents for GRT right now. So would need to actually see a lot more volume coming in above that. Now, the good news is that we're still about 3 days away from closing this 4-day candle. So I would expect actually to get a little bit more bullish volume coming in on this candle anyway. And especially after confirming very, very nice support off this 50-period EMA, you can see a lot of wicks selling to the downside. And then obviously on the recent huge bullish candle, confirming price level support right at that 50-period EMA as well. So hopefully we can see further upside break above this 12-period EMA. And then that would be a good sign to actually see a little continuation action, probably running up until about that 35-cent level before retracing and trying to put in those higher lows. Now, the shorter term charts for cryptos in general have been looking pretty good. If you are following me over on Twitter, I've been talking about the hourly Bitcoin setup looking good. So make sure you are dropping me a follow over on Twitter. At @coin_x is the handle over there. Looking forward to chatting with everyone. But right now, the 4-hour for GRT still looking pretty good as well. If we look at how these exponential moving averages have behaved, then even on the recent move or the previous move where we saw a backtest confirmation, then we didn't really see any continuation and then finally flushed. But what we want to see is kind of what we're seeing right now, where we see confirmation of resistances on these moves, a slow break and confirmation of that once we actually confirm supports and resistances on the EMAs. Finally, a rally, backtest, and then a further confirmation of upside with a higher high. So pretty good actual setup for the shorter term right now. We are looking like we are a little bit toppy right now, so we might potentially get another backtest, but we are starting to get stuck up at some previous short-term resistance levels. So we would be looking at 30.75 for that. Above that level is going to be looking at 31.8. So pretty big resistance levels up overhead that we do have to fight out and take out. But with this kind of structure, putting in higher highs and higher lows, we will be able to kind of exceed the predictability and the likelihood of being able to actually do that on the short term. But obviously, a lot of that is dependent on what the rest of the crypto and altcoin space start doing. 8 hours, same sort of thing. We were looking at a previous level of resistance in between the 26 and 50. So that's pretty much what we did find in this instance. So we confirmed resistance on the 12, broke up in this level, confirmed 12 as support, continued to rally up, resistance on the 50, back tested these levels, especially after this bullish cross, confirmed support, and then finally got our very nice bullish candle on top of the 50 once that was confirmed as a resistance level, and we confirmed support on the 12 and 26. So very nice change in this trend, especially with these bullish candles being exceedingly better looking than the bearish candles, especially since the magnitude of one completely knocked out 3 of these little mini bearish bodies. So we're actually looking pretty good to the upside. And even if we do get a little bit of a slowing pattern, why these EMAs roll over and another back test, what we're looking for right now is just that confirmation, just like we've been seeing. So this chart is pretty reliable and holding up on these indicators. So even looking at the 6 hour, for example, same sort of thing. This is exactly why we look at all different time frames and confirm how they are doing, how they hold up, and what they are actually saying about each level. So if they're not actually showing support and resistance, you can kind of invalidate that chart setting and that indicator, which is pretty standard for a lot of indicators of what you're doing. You use it until it works or until it stops working. And then obviously you want to focus on what has shown confirmation signals so far. So yeah, right now, like we said, I think on some of the longer term charts, we are looking up at a little bit of resistance point. So especially after bouncing so much off the bottom, and even for the bounce, like we talked about, we're looking at a gain of about 46%. So pretty nice upside move from the high. So it's normal now to start to put in that higher low. So we already had our high, pulled back, higher low. Now rallying up again, trying to set another higher low. So that would need to come in above about the 23.3 level. So expecting that to happen, especially after kicking off these EMAs on multiple time frames. So that's all normal and pretty much what we expect and standard after such big pullbacks like this that we expect out of GRT. So just continue to be patient if you are looking to buy the dip and dollar cost average. These are kind of the setups that you want to do, and we do see such big retracements on these type of charts. Obviously not financial advice, but yeah, that's just basically a strategy type scenario and some advice for that. So yeah, with that, that is going to go ahead and wrap up the show today on GRT, the graph token. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you have not done so just yet. Do appreciate it. Also, drop me a follow here over on Twitter or X at @coin_trades is the handle. Looking forward to chatting with everyone over there. Don't forget to post all questions, comments, issues, disagreements down in the comment sections below. Do love getting back to each and every one of you. Appreciate all the love and support, as always does mean so much. Stay safe, take care, coin traders, and I'll catch you back in the next video.